Welcome back to The Unknown Angler. Today we're going to be tying the EP Brush Kwan. Today is an EP brush for the EP Brush Kwan. And what we're going to be using is EP fibers in brown. We're going to use tanned. Then we're going to use a little flash, a little polar flash. This is gold. And we're going to be using hairline micro silicon legs. These are great. They're very, very small legs that like to use on this brush. Anyway, so we're going to start out with the EP fibers. Start out with the brown. Get a small bunch of the brown. Now, I'm going to get a small bunch of the brown that and then comb it out every time. Probably cut off maybe a 1/4 inch bunch. If you squeeze it down tight, it will be about a 1/4 of an inch bunch. And I use these little blocks. You can use anything you want, but I made a little blocking jig with a little wooden block, 2 blocks on the side, and 1 inch and 1/4 inch increments all the way through. I set that to 1 so that I can cut up my EP fibers and place them at the 1 inch point. Cut it up. I'm going to place that on the table. Cut another bunch. Same thing. Take it, place it up on the table. Cut a bunch. Do the same thing, about the same amount. If you kind of squish it down somewhere in a 1/4 inch or so range. I always brush these out prior to doing this so I get a non-knotted bunch. Use a little dog brush. Buy one of these. Don't use your dog brush or your cat brush. Don't get all the cat fur and everything mixed up in this. Keep it nice and clean. I'm all for saving a penny, but do the exact same thing we did before. Perfect. Now you have a alternating brown, tan, all the way down. We're going to go to the swing and flash, or the polar flash as they call it. We go to the polar flash, gold. I'm going to cut off a decent bunch of this. Once again, this I'm going to keep right at around the 1-inch mark. I do this a little bit different. Keep it around the 1-inch mark, and I just keep cutting it, stacking it in here to get a whole bunch of it all at once. Just get a big stack of it. And just one strip of this makes a whole lot of, obviously, a whole lot of flash. So I got a big bunch of flash right there. Whole bunch of it. Just going to take that, little pieces, and just kind of lay it on top. Okay, that's good. Now for the legs, I just take a whole row out of the pack, which is, I don't even know how many legs are there, but take a whole row and I cut those into 3 sections. So basically the third section here is going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be about 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 inches. I'm going to measure off 1 3/4 inches here. See what we get right about there. And you don't want a whole ton of these legs in here. You just want a couple of legs for each fly, on each fly you're going to have. So what I do is I like to lay a leg across each intersection first time through. In other words, put a leg right through the middle of the brown, right through the middle of the tan, through the middle of the brown, middle of the tan, so on and so forth, all the way down. Wax our wire. You don't need to put a ton of wax on here. I do that, put my finger on here. Make 10 twists. Here, cut it off. Likewise this end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to go through one last time and make sure everything's kind of lined up and in the center and kind of nicely placed to where you want it. Just a light pushing around, doesn't take much. Perfect. Take that off of there, it's going to twist a little bit. And we just spin. Spin like crazy. And you can see you get a nice little variation in here. I'm not sure, you know, with the way the lighting is, whether you can tell, but there's a nice defining line between the dark brown and the tan, which gives you that nice variation in your fly where you get dark brown, tan, dark brown, tan, dark brown, tan. And we'll go over this one time. And it's weird, but your flash looks like it almost disappears. It doesn't, but once it starts getting spun up in there, it seems to be a lot less flash than you actually put in there. When you actually fish the fly, you get it out in the light, the flash really kind of starts popping again. So, and let's keep spinning this. Go over it one more time. Make sure everything's brushed out. Make sure all my legs are sticking out and not twirled in. And we can cut it off. Perfect. And there you have a very nice EP Kwan brush. And we'll go tie a fly with this, and we'll show you what this fly looks like when you're done. Today we're going to be tying the EP Brush Kwan. So I just made an EP brush. I showed you how to make that. And basically it's the original Kwan colors, which are tan and brown. We're going to start here with a B10S Gamakatsu hook in size 2. I use the size 2s and the size 4s. The smaller ones are, well, you just vary the size. These are a lighter wire hook, but they're extremely sharp, and they've been proven this year to be extremely corrosion resistant, which really surprised me. I didn't think they would hold up too well in the salt, but they do. Anyway, here's some ultra thread, 140. Usually use. I'm going to start right up by the eye of the hook because we're going to load this up with some dumbbell eyes first. Now, here's what I like to use on these, but they're kind of hard to find. But these barbell eyes in a 5/32, and I use the same size on both the 4s and the 2s sizes. You can use whatever size eye you want. You can use whatever makeup eye you want. Small and medium eyes will work fine. Lead or the barbell like this. Leave yourself a good amount of headroom here. We are going to tie a weed guard in on this with some 25-pound mono. So just use X-wraps, tie underneath. Make sure you get that nice and tight. And then just wrap all the way back to the bend of the hook and just a little bit beyond the bend. There we go, just a little bit into the bend. And we're going to take the old Loctite here. Don't put a lot on, just put a little bit right over the top of the eye, a little drop will do it. And that'll get those eyes on there pretty darn good. All right. Bright orange chenille in a smaller size. And just pull the end off so you don't get a big bump there. I'm trying to get a bump of chenille, but you don't want it all bumped up in there. tie back up to the bend of the hook. And you want to go a little bit beyond it. Just take a few wraps here. This is, they always call it an egg sac. But I just think it's just an attraction point on the fly, and it's pretty buried. It serves kind of two purposes: to support the tail a little bit to keep it from fouling, but we're not going to really put a big enough bump in there for that. But with this bright orange, it will stick out pretty cleanly. So little egg sac on the back there, right at the base. And then we're going to use some craft fur in a tand. And as usual, I cut out my little square patches. I divide the 5-inch patches of craft fur that I buy. If you buy bigger craft fur, you can divide it down with whatever you want, but I cut it into 9 patches. You've seen me do this 100 times. Just take and just, you know, pull all the underfur out from under there. Now, I'm trying to get this about 2 times the hook shank, so it's not a really long tail. With me, it goes right to the end on my vise. I try about twice the hook shank. Actually, I go right to here on my vise. I use my vise for measurement. You've seen me do that before. It helps me when I'm tying, because if you're using the same equipment all the time and you know where everything lines up on it, then it's really nice. And you can very quickly tie a whole bunch of these without having to measure anything off. But about two times the hook shank, somewhere in there. We're going to go with a brown fine point Sharpie. And we're just going to pull that tail close and draw a line on each side. I do a minimum of 3, a maximum of 4 bars in there. And I try not to touch that until I think it's until I think it has dried a little bit. Next, we're going to add some crystal flash. So I only do 2 strands of crystal flash. Because I don't want an overly flashy fly here, and I have a lot of flash actually built into the dubbing brush that I made. So do like we do before, 2 strands on one side, bend it over to the other, wrap it down, pull them all together, go in there, and come in about the 4th mark you made and cut that off. So they're slightly shorter than the tail itself. There you have it. Any brown rubber legs will do you fine. These are a grizzly black and brown. I break off 2. Once again, tie them in on one side. Flip it over. Tie it off on the other. Pull them all together. And these I cut off way shorter than the tail. So I'm going to cut these off actually where I drew about the 3rd bar, but maybe 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches in length. Okay. I'm going to smooth out the bump here a little bit. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take the dubbing brush we made, and this is that what I call the Kwan dubbing brush. It has rubber legs built right into it. I'm going to start here at the base with the brown, put it right in there, right where we started this. Now, I've seen a lot of guys take and try to helicopter the wire off instead of cutting it. I don't know what wire they're using, but the stuff I'm using, I wouldn't try to helicopter that off. It's, I think I'd bend this hook in half if I tried to do that. Okay. Take a pair of hackle pliers now, connect to the base of the... I'm going to pull all those fibers back. You've seen me do this a bunch of times if you've been watching me do these. If you haven't, what you do is you make your wraps, but you pull all your fibers back and you move the rubber legs out of the way so that you wrap back on everything. And it takes a little while to do this, but take your time. You're in no huge rush. These flies are relatively easy to tie. Well, they're super easy to tie. But if you don't take your time and pull all the fibers back, what you will find is that you will make a real mess that you're not able to undo with your bodkin, your needle, at the end. In other words, you're going to trap a lot of fibers that you won't be able to pull out. So the more time you take and be careful about making sure these are pulled back and you're not wrapping over the top of them and trapping them, you'll be doing fine. Also, at this point, there's a lot of rubber legs that are kind of in the brush itself, and they're going in every single which way and direction. You can take the time and kind of pull on those and straighten them out and get them to where you want them at this point, which is kind of nice. One more wrap here. Beautiful. I'm going to turn the fly towards me, pull it forward. And this is an interesting piece right here, because I'm going to tie off underneath here, mainly because I want the fly upside down now, and I'm going to try to get as much of the EP material out of the way when I go in to tie off the fly as I can. Make 3 wraps over, bend it back, make a wrap in front. There we go. And snip that off. Okay. So if you have a pair of flat nose pliers like this, go in here right now and do a 1/4 turn on there to make sure that you've mashed down any of the wire that's left hanging out, so that you don't break your thread on the wire. And then wrap over that. And then I like to come in here, wrap behind it once. And you see me do this all the time. I'm just going to burn the rest of those fibers up front away. So now you've made an area nice and clean for your head. Okay, boom, boom. Beautiful. Now, last but not least, before we start picking it out, we are going to we're going to put a weed guard on there. What I'm using is 30-pound Mason Hard Mono. And if you take this, it's got a real kink to it right here. If you take this and you drop it into boiling water, you don't have to put it in a tube or anything else. Just drop it into boiling water and it will straighten out. It'll do that. Just cut off 3-inch sections, drop it into boiling water, and it'll straighten right out like this. Then just take the end, mash it down real good with a pair of pliers, pull it back. Right there, will make it for a great little tie-in area for you. Gonna tie that in up front, nice and close. Gonna pull back on that, go behind, 1, go behind again, 2, 3, 4, there we go. Make sure that's right where I want it. It's gonna be right over the top. Yep, it's gonna be right over the top of the point. You can come in then and clip that. And just make yourself a nice neat head. And my normal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 term wet finish. Right on the point there. Pair of scissors, just clip it off. Once again, I use the very thin Solarez bone dries. Like I said, this is what I've been using for my trout flies. I usually use the medium Solarez for anything where I'm trying to get some real stiffness in, but when I'm doing these heads, the really fine Solarez, Solarays, or whatever it is, really helps out. And then, last but not least, this fly still does not look the way it should, so we need to pick it out. So last but not least, let's pick this fly out. We're going to pick out the top. All the way around. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little bit of a haircut here. We're going to go straight across. Make sure we pull those off to one side if we can. Going to go straight across under the eyes, cut right off there. And just give it a mohawk right down the middle. Actually, let's cut those off too. So if you look at that fly, the variation that's running through there right now and the variation that runs through this top is just beautiful as far as the making the, and you can see that that little egg sac or whatever you want to call it sticking out from in there. And we'll and so from behind looks really good. Beautiful little fly. There it is. See you next time.